Yes,
So
definitely.
as more people are trickling in, I guess I'll start with a small intro to the session and also to
Yes.
Ermi. So
Mm-hmm.
Ermi is a design leader with over 20 years of experience working at agencies, corporate in-house, freelance, and startups. So she teaches EQ skills like confidence and persuasiveness to help new leaders succeed, and I'm most passionate about empowering more women to become leaders. Today, she
Yeah.
will be leading the discussion on how to ask and get a pay rise, upgrade your job life, and more through the art of persuasion, negotiation strategies, and confident communication skills you can apply to every area of your life. So
Yes.
now the floor is all yours.
Yay. Hi,
Thank you.
everyone. Thanks, Cynthia. I am so excited to be here. I can't contain myself. Thank you so much for joining me in my talk today on the art of salary negotiation and beyond. So, for those of you who I haven't met yet, I'm Ermi. As Cynthia said, I'm a design leader. I'm very active in ADPLIST as a top 1% mentor representing the design community. Proud Filipino Australian, yay! Living in Sydney, the weather is beautiful. I'm a mum. I'm very excited to be celebrating my 45th birthday next month. I'm very passionate about fitness and karate and just putting it out there into the universe. I will be a future TEDx speaker. So for today's topic, you need to be a confident communicator, right? To negotiate. But some might think, you need to have been confident all your life and assertive. But that's not how I started. This is how I started. That's me in my family portrait taken in the 70s, me, that really super shy girl in the middle. I was so shy and timid and I never spoke up. But through the years, I developed my communication skills and learned a few negotiation strategies along the way. To how it's going now. In 2022, I was listed in ADPLIST's top 100 most impactful mentors for that year. So, and I'm just trying to create impact everywhere I go. So whether it's in my one-on-one mentor sessions, thanks for the emojis, or connecting with people, or sharing my tips and experience and skills through these virtual talks, this is what I love to do. But today is not about my transformation journey from shy to confident leader. That was actually last year's talk, which I can share with you later at the end of the session. I'm more interested to find out about you. So this is the first poll, Cynthia. I'm really interested to find out what inspired you to attend today's talk. Is it because you've tried to negotiate your salary in the past and you haven't succeeded? Or maybe you're a junior designer, or even you transition to UX, you're at the start of your career and you want to get the right pay. Or maybe you have an upcoming performance review and you want to use as many of today's topics or today's tips as possible. Or it could be none of the above. You're just here to party and connect with amazing people. Yeah. Okay, let's have a look at the poll. Ooh. Nice. Well, whatever your reason, you came to the right place. I hope from today's session you learn at least one strategy that you can, readily use today. Let's go. Okay. So let's go straight to it. This is what I have been able to successfully negotiate in the past. So even before I started a role, even at the contract stage, I was able to negotiate a $10,000 pay rise. In previous roles, I've negotiated $20,000 and $30,000 pay rise. I've also been able to negotiate a job title upgrade with the job description to match, and more recently, a 4-day work week. But before I could do this, I needed to adjust my mindset and approach to money in general and my career path. And for me to do that, this is pretty much the thought pattern I had and how I thought about money. So I thought, oh, I don't want to be greedy. I'm afraid to ask for more. What if they say no? I'm pretty much, just grateful to be employed, really. But what I know now is by asking for more, you are not being greedy. According to a recent Hayes salary survey in 2023 and 2024, 72% of employees are not satisfied with their pay. You are only asking to have your salary get closer to what you should be paid. I mean, it's really great to be verbally appreciated, but when it comes to feeling valued at work, that worth is tied directly to pay. A lot of us experience this. I'm afraid to ask for more. But what I firmly believe is if you don't ask, you don't get. When you understand your worth, your level of experience, skills, you gain the power and knowledge to know what figure to ask, which you know you will deserve. What if they say no? Well, especially if it's an internal role, you have nothing to lose because you're already employed. They won't think you're greedy. It shows that you understand your worth and you want to grow and get paid for it. I'm pretty much grateful to be employed in any role, really, but you need to make sure you maximize every opportunity you have in every role. If it's a medium to large company and they have a learning budget, use that budget to enroll in external courses or even, attend conferences like today. Ask about internal opportunities, join a group or committee because it could lead to connecting with key stakeholders that you would normally not have exposure to had you not joined that group, which could potentially influence the decision makers to your future pay rise. Now, in this whole journey, I'm also interested to find out, have you experienced these negative work situations? Feel free to react with emojis. I think we only have positive emojis. So because these are negative experiences, feel free to use these positive emojis sarcastically, if you like. So have you experienced, asking for a pay rise and, the boss of the company has used too many excuses for why there's no pay increase? Or, there's too many delays, using external excuses for why you can't get that increase, to the point where you couldn't wait any longer, so you quit. Horrible. If the company is understaffed, you are doing too much unpaid overtime, which companies like to include as occasional in your contract. You are working harder, but the salary doesn't match, or the worst, when people have recently left the company, so you're absorbing other people's roles and not getting paid for it. And this is exactly how I feel with all of those situations. That doesn't make sense. If an employee is providing so much value, is a high performer, and the company still doesn't pay them what they're worth, that definitely does not make sense. So that was probably my biggest driver and why I created today's talk, to share these with you all so you can experience success. So in all of my attempts to, get the salary increase, naturally I experienced a lot of failures, which turned out to be valuable lessons. So in my first attempt, this is what not to do. So as a junior, I just accepted any job offer because I had that, I'm just grateful to be employed mentality. I just thought, I'm an IC, individual contributor. I'll just work hard, grind. I didn't ask. I wasn't proactive in my, performance review. I just expected to get a pay rise. I was pretty quiet and introverted, so I didn't really have good stakeholder relationships. Even though, I developed a good design reputation, I realized that's not enough. And I also didn't plan what to say in the performance review. I just expected things to be handed to me. So as a result, I only got a minimum increase, which was $5,000, which at the time only covered the increase in living expenses. Several attempts later, getting closer to success, I planned months ahead. So I decided to validate my achievements by listing them. Listing them and sending them to my boss before the performance review so that they could review it, because I learned that that whole process takes months. So getting them to review it months ahead so that at the time of my performance review, it would be approved, that would mean I would get paid sooner. I maintained my design reputation. My EQ skills were okay. I was a senior designer now. My stakeholder relationships could be better. And as a result, well, super ambitious me, I asked for 20,000 and I was told that was too much. So I got half, which was $10,000 pay rise. Finally, I developed and learned several negotiation strategies, which led me to success. So I realized that, listing my achievements might be seen as internally biased. So I chose to research the market, find the median range for my salary, my level of experience, company type, and location, which I discovered all affected what that salary should be. I also continue to plan months ahead. I continue to develop my EQ skills and stakeholder relationships, which I'll go through later. And I positioned myself to be indispensable to the company. And guess what? I got 100% of what I asked for, which was $30,000 pay rise. Now, to give you a bit of context to how I chose this figure, I was at that role for probably only 2.5 years. In my first year, I wasn't paid a pay rise at all. I was doing two people's roles because, I just transitioned to UX. I was a junior UX designer reporting to the head of UX. And because I was a visual designer, in my first 15 years, the head of UX decided to, leverage my skills and asked me to be, second in charge, help supervise the team of graphic designers, as well as doing creative direction to help them out, as well as doing my primary role of being a UX UI designer. And understanding that at the time, recruitment costs would have costed, between $20,000 to $40,000, as well as 3 to 6 months it takes to, onboard and train a new designer. Had I left, this $30,000 figure doesn't seem that much at all compared to the full time and cost that would have been spent if I left. So in presenting all of this information and preparing myself for success, this is how I reframed the way the company saw my value, so that they will be more than happy to pay me more to stay. Yes? Yes, exactly. That was literally me jumping for joy when I got that pay rise. So what I learned from all these experiences, if you are lucky enough to be in that position, to be selective, try not to accept any job offer. Don't accept the contract as is. Ask questions. See, even if you're at the signing stage, see if you can still negotiate your salary. Don't work hard in private. Self-promotion actually works. You are not bragging. People need to understand what value you provide to the company. And don't let personal biases affect stakeholder relationships. I'm pretty sure all of us have experienced not liking our boss, but they are the key to helping us get that pay rise. So we need to make sure we have a good relationship with them. Now, this is the long game. where, you know, you could do this in probably 12 months. These are the negotiation strategies that I've come up with. It is a list of 10. It doesn't necessarily mean you have to do all 10 just to get a pay rise, but I've just created this complete list for all you wonderful people. You can use, you know, one of them or a combination of them to help you get to your desired pay rise. So this is about giving them, the company or your boss, every reason to say yes to whatever you ask for. Now, before you start, do your research. So the more you research you do to find out the median salary market rate and the HR processes, the more bargaining power you'll gain. So even if you're at the interview stage, you are trying to find out, how will they reward me if I join? And you can do this by asking certain questions like, are salaries reviewed at performance reviews? Because sometimes it's just a performance review. When was the last salary review? Are bonuses awarded? If so, is it only for managers? Or, you know, is it based on company performance or individual performance? And are there share and stock options? Now, when you start, try to learn as quickly as possible. Learn how teams collaborate. Learn who the leaders are, the heads, the decision makers, because they will be vital to your upcoming salary review. It also helps if you're a designer to understand company operations and have a little bit of business acumen, because it helps to understand that so that it validates your design with achieving business and customer goals, as well as, you know, future progression if you want to become, you know, head of design or design director in the future. List milestone goals. So I talked about having a strategic mindset. So it's not just about, you know, going to the role and just, you know, being neck deep into, you know, all the comings and goings of the company. Be strategic. So from day one, set milestones you can achieve at 3, 6, and 12 months up until your performance and salary review. So your goals are always top of mind. Always plan to win, because it's very easy. Sometimes I do it as well, just to get bogged down into, you know, BAU, business as usual stuff, and you forget why you chose to join that company in the first place. Make sure your goals are top of mind. So if, you know, for example, if you're a junior, what skills could you learn in the first 3 months? For designers, anytime you're designing something, think, how can I make this portfolio worthy? If you're a leader, think about how you can continue to create business value as well as look after your team. Now, developing EQ skills. So this is something that, you know, I struggled with when I used to be more quiet. But what I understood was you don't need to be loud to develop that connection, because connection builds trust. When you are able to clearly articulate, you know, what you want to say through communication, it helps understanding and it bridges those relationships. And whether you're confident or not, half the time I'm not, but you try to present yourself in a confident manner, because it brings reassurance and trust and reliability in your boss and the company of your value, so that they can always feel like they can rely on you anytime, and, you know, we'll be happy to pay you for the value that you bring. Now, developing strong stakeholder relationships, making sure you are connecting with decision makers, which ties into, you know, the previous steps about finding out who those key decision makers are. And yes, connect with recruiters. What does that even mean? So what I learned was they are the gatekeeper to your potential role and could give you extra insights. So I sought to understand, you know, part of their role. I worked for an in-house recruitment company as a designer, and seeing, you know, when I expressed a bit of empathy with a recruiter who was liaising with me, I said, oh, you know, she kept apologizing profusely that she kept replying late to me, And when I showed just a little bit of empathy, that I understood that, her role is a thankless job. She has to deal with hundreds of candidates every day. It might be hard to juggle. She actually gave me extra insights into the company and, shared extra information with me that helped me in my negotiation, which helped me get that pay rise before I even started. So yes, make sure you develop those human connections. Track your achievements. So keep a list. So this doesn't need to be, a full document. You could, if you're more of, if you have a really strong memory, it could just be a mental list, but I'm more of a documenter. So I'll, have a document with all of the projects that I've done, the results that I achieved. I try to keep it up to date so that when it comes time for salary review, the results that demonstrate my value will be ready. Be visible. So what does that mean? So it can be face-to-face, it can be, on LinkedIn or, the work that you do, self-promote. And, if you're a designer, try to work on key projects so that you become visible to those key decision makers who can see that you're doing amazing work. Join committee, because the more exposure you have to key people, the more you will set yourself up for success as one of the company's star performers. So in a recent role, I actually joined a women's leadership committee. Had I not joined that committee, they wouldn't have known, all the great work that I was doing. So I was able to develop stakeholder relationships because I joined that committee. Be persistent. So this does take a bit of energy. Follow up every time. If you have a meeting with your boss, include a specific agenda so they can be prepared for all, the questions and things you're going to talk about. Ask for ETAs till you get action. This can be exhausting, but it is worth it. What you're trying to do is make it impossible for them to ignore you and keep saying no. Be indispensable. So try to provide a need for your role that no one else can do but you. Find that gap so that if you left, it'd be a risk to the business, a loss of IP, talent, time, and money to replace you. Understanding that it costs less to keep you happy. And have a plan B. If all else fails, you have exhausted every option, you've developed great relationships, you are a star performer, plan an exit strategy if this company isn't for you and still won't give you that pay rise. If you're a designer, job search in the meantime, make sure your portfolio is up to date, CV is up to date, connecting with recruiters so that if you're lucky enough to get an offer while your current company is still delaying getting back to you, you may have the opportunity to counter offer. And then again, it's totally up to you whether you want to take the external offer or stay with your current company. Either way, it's a win-win for you. And I have talked a lot about salary negotiation, but as I said, this is beyond. These are things that you can negotiate beyond the salary to keep you happy and thriving in your role. So before you start, these are certain things that you can negotiate. You can get a job title upgrade. You can make sure flexible hours and days are in your contract. Get paid overtime because they usually assume that's included. And you can also include a potential career path. So when it comes to job title and responsibilities, just say you're in the interview process and you can see the role has more responsibility as advertised. I usually propose to upgrade the job title and responsibilities to match because it shows you understand the role. And in this way, you are presenting the potential value you could bring to the role and then therefore can negotiate. Flexibility. So define your hours and days. So even though we've had COVID, Hybrid and remote working may not last forever. If you put it in your contract, do that to protect your flexible arrangement. Now, this is a tricky one. Try to get paid for overtime. So even though in most packages they include it as an occasional, make sure you set your boundaries. So it could be, you know, if you do overtime, you would prefer to do, you know, longer days, no weekends at all. These are a few of mine. If there is regular overtime, define the maximum hours per week and per month you are willing to work that would be inclusive of occasional overtime. And you can even negotiate for more time in lieu. If the company doesn't want to pay you overtime, see if you are doing so much, like an extra 10 hours per week, which what I was doing at a previous role, that would mean 1 day time in lieu per week. So that would be 4 days off for me. Make sure you set that boundary so you're setting yourself up for success. No job is worth your mental health. You are not performing at your best if you're burnt out. So make sure you set those boundaries. I saw this post yesterday, and you know, I'm all for hard work, but I really believe in stop glamorizing the grind. I just want to get 7 hours of sleep, have healthy relationships, feel psychologically safe at work, take my sick days without guilt, be paid a wage, work hard when I'm at work, have clear boundaries, and just self-care myself to success. Now, what I mean by creating your future career path, you know, for example, if you're in a senior role, when you're negotiating your contract, it could mean including that you could potentially lead or manage a team in the future with the option to hire and manage. I actually did this recently. This way, you are protecting your role so that if the company was to hire a manager, you'll be considered first instead of them hiring someone above you. So you want to make sure all your hard work in progressing is rewarded. Now, those 10 steps might feel a little bit exhaustive. So if you just want a quick win, I've got a few quick counter answers for certain situations. So when you're on the phone with a recruiter and they're phone screening and they're like talking to you, what are your salary expectations? For me, I would say to mention a salary range. I never really say what I'm on because they don't know. Instead, I present the salary that I'm looking for. So when you present a salary range, if you get an offer, try to accept the top end of that range. Depending on how flexible they are, even if you got the bottom end or the middle end of that range, it'd still be more than what you're currently on. When they say, so if you're applying for a sole designer role, most companies just think it's, you know, you're just a sole mid-level designer. It's not a lead role, but it will be, because they need to understand the designer will make design decisions, which is the responsibility of a senior or lead. So yeah, all sole designers out there, it's a lead role. Now, typically when you're asking for a pay rise, one of the common answers I'll get is, you know, we don't have the budget for that. So my research usually includes the current market rate for my role from external salary surveys and recruiting companies, which validates those facts. Now, if you're, you know, in a situation where they decline your pay rise, they may say things to delay it, like saying, oh, the budgets have already been approved for the financial year. Now, if you're a leader and you feel confident speaking in this tone of voice, you can say things like, okay, well, let's find a way to include it in next year's budget. If you're not that confident to speak like that, you know, leader to leader, you can pose it more as a question. You know, have a casual chat with your boss to go, oh, is there a way we can include it in next year's budget? And then you can sort of try to negotiate from there. when you get unclear answers, and vague answers like, oh, I'll see what I can do. Great. This is where you are persistent until you get action. So you can say things like, okay, I'll send you an email noting what was discussed, and I'll follow up with you within a week. When's your next availability? To make sure you are, in every conversation, you are getting action and not another few months of delays. Okay, now in all of those counter answers, it does take a bit of negotiation strategies and communication. So if you want, extra help and insight in exactly how to be a strong negotiator, I highly recommend this book, Never Split the Difference. I actually realized reading that book, I was already currently doing a few of their strategies. So it's a quick read. So from all of this, what I've learned is that money isn't everything, but it definitely starts with more pay, especially for women. I also understand that knowledge is power, that the more you know, the more bargaining power you'll have. The more skills and experience you gain, the more value you can offer. And the more you connect, the more opportunities you create for yourself to enjoy a life where you are valued. And that is non-negotiable. Thank you. Thanks, everyone. If you're interested in hearing my talk about transformation from shy to confident leader, on my LinkedIn, you'll see a link to the ADPLIST Masterclass that is currently on ADPLIST YouTube page. Just search for my name. I think I'm the only Ermi there, so you'll be able to find my talk. Thanks, Cynthia.
Thank you, Ermi. I love that talk, and I hope everyone in the audience also got a lot of tips and tricks from this session. I was actually monitoring the chat just now, and there's actually several people who might be going into interviews soon, and they said that like this is perfect timing, and they are just taking notes so they can enter the interview, confident to approach this conversation.
Well, that's what this talk is for.
Yes, so perfect. I guess we'll just jump straight into Q&A then. Thank you so much, everyone who has submitted so far, and feel free to keep submitting while we're still chatting or upvoting the questions that you want to get answered most by Ermi. So we'll start off with the top voted question. I'll show it on stage as well. So I'll combine this with another question because it's pretty similar actually. But this audience member would like to know, as an entry-level UX designer who has transitioned from other roles and have the transferable skills, but not the UX experience, how do you ask for a better pay in the current market situation? Or the other question was, how do you get creative with asking for a better pay?
Hi, Studi. Actually, I did this in my first entry-level UX designer. So I was, as I mentioned, before I transitioned to UX, I was a visual designer through to design manager. So I've got 15 years in that. And I was used to dealing with senior stakeholders, presenting to clients. So I've got those presentation skills as well as communication skills, as well as already having UI and visual design skills that a lot of UX designers may or may not have. So what I tell all entry-level designers, UX designers transitioning, try to find transferable skills in your current or previous skill set. Even if you feel like you're in a totally unrelated, your previous experience you feel like is unrelated, like, oh, you worked in customer service, or you worked in retail, or you were, something technical, or you're a developer, to go, well, I'm not a designer. How do I find those transferable skills? There are definitely transferable skills in all of those that I mentioned. Even if you're in finance or you would have to be used to dealing with data and numbers and analyzing those statistics. If you're in customer service, you would have strong people skills. So you'd have to learn how to communicate and negotiate and defend your designs. I guarantee you every role, no matter what it is, would be transferable to an entry-level UX. And then how I would negotiate with pay, what I tell a lot of designers is don't focus on the experience you don't have. Try to reframe the interview so that you're presenting them with all the other skills that you do have that other candidates may not have. So I focused on all the other value that I could bring. So I said, oh, I have strong stakeholder relationships. I'm used to presenting to senior stakeholders. So I have that confidence in communication. So these are all transferable skills. And the way you would ask for better pay is focus on what you do have. And then, again, reframe it so that you're always presenting yourself in a better light than just, I don't have the experience.
Perfect. Thank you. I think that's a great segue to the next question, actually, by Chloe. So she was asking how to dance around the salary negotiation in a job interview. So obviously you don't want to undersell yourself. So you know your worth. You don't want to undersell or lowball yourself, but you also don't want to miss out on a great opportunity.
Hi, Chloe. First of all, as I mentioned, in terms of reframing my mindset towards money, I'm not afraid of money. I understand that my time is valuable, and so is every candidate, no matter what level you are. So I don't want to waste time going through the second, third, fifth round if it's not the right salary. It starts with the salary. So I ask in the first instance, even if they don't ask it, like I just mentioned it up front. So I might say, in terms of salary expectations, who do I speak to see if this is the right fit and matches my expectations? Because again, it's not about, oh, I'm just desperate for a job. It's, as a candidate, you are trying to find a mutual fit because you need to understand that you are giving them value. You're trying to fill a need that they're looking for. So make sure you hold on to your worth and not just be, desperate for any figure. I ask upfront in the first round. And I present a range that's at least 10K more than what I'm on. So worst case scenario, you get a 10K pay rise.
Great. Thank you for that. And kind of leading on from that then, there was a question, or just, I'll reframe this question actually, but are there things that you should kind of avoid in mentioning when it comes to negotiating your salary? So more specifically, I'll show the question that I'm kind of leaning towards. So when you're negotiating a pay rise, do you mention or hint about leaving if you don't get the raise you want, or is that unsaid understanding in the conversation?
Is this about negotiating a raise for an internal role? Okay, yeah, about leaving if you don't get the raise you want. Okay. I think you'd have to use your EQ skills. So it depends. If you have a really strong positive relationship, which I always try to have with my boss, where I feel comfortable enough to be open and frank with them. I've done this in probably previous roles where I felt comfortable being transparent with them. I think in my earliest role as a junior, I did the wrong thing. I threatened to leave. So that wasn't great, which is why I only got 5K pay rise. And, obviously it's, makes them a little bit salty as well, giving that to you. But in terms of whether you think you should mention or hint, in a previous company where I had a really good relationship, it was kind of, I spoke to them like a friend. I said, look, I know we're understaffed. I need help. I'm doing heaps of overtime. this salary increase, will covers, the 2 roles that I'm fulfilling. I did feel comfortable saying, recruiters approach me every day. My email is full on LinkedIn, but I don't want to leave. I want to make sure, I stay. So try to present yourself as someone who wants to stay. And if you did have to leave, it's because you had no choice. Not, give me the pay increase or else I'll leave. It's more like, we've got a great rapport. I love working here. I want to continue growing. But, hopefully in the next few months, we'll get a positive result and, we'll both be happy. I get the pay increase I'm asking for, and hopefully, I won't have to look externally. So they're the types of words that I use.
Fantastic. Thank you so much. So again, this leads to another question on the Q&A tab. I guess if the conversation hasn't arisen yet, or you do kind of intend to or plan to approach your direct manager or something when it comes to salary negotiation, what are tips, or like what is the best way to start that conversation? Should you wait until your performance review? Should you kind of is there a right time to kind of approach this conversation?
Well, I usually find that out in the interview. So even before I even start. But if you haven't, had the chance to mention the interview, like I said, I'm not afraid of asking about money. Again, to me, money is a tool. It shouldn't be something we're afraid to ask for. So, I usually actually ask it in the interview so that by the time I've started, I would already have opened up that transparency with my boss to go, I'm the type of person who's a high performer. Let's, even in my first 3-month or 6-month probation where, there is no expected salary review, I would be introducing the conversation about, okay, well, in 6 months' time, these are the types of things I plan to achieve and would be looking for some sort of increase. So I definitely mention it. So, in every conversation I have, whether it's a 3-month chat, a 6-month chat, it leads towards my progression and that upcoming increase.
Yeah, great. I guess it's like kind of building stepping stones for yourself.
Exactly. So I'm pretty much setting up expectations so they know I'm going for that increase, but I'm also performing and providing value to the business at the same time. So at least I know it's validated. I'm not just asking for more money.
Yeah, perfect. So switching gears a bit then, you were mentioning before during your presentation of being indispensable at work. Are you able to give more examples of how you can be indispensable, and how can I go about finding like how I can be indispensable for the team and the company?
It can be, again, it starts with relationships. So it can be simple things like, when you're finding out who the key stakeholders are. I saw a gap in, my boss. They were very unorganized. They, had short attention span. They never really briefed me properly. So, having me on board, I kind of, I established the workflow and kind of filled that gap in his lack of organization, which helped him focus on his primary role of being the head of UX, so that I was doing him a favor by being a support. And then, for example, when I've, in startups, so in one startup, there was only 20 people, there was no PM. So we, wore multiple hats. And I filled the gap of, I'm not going to say I'm a product manager whatsoever, but I helped establish processes for what a product manager should be doing, in terms of prioritizing features, not just me focusing on UI design. So trying to fill that gap that the company needs so that they can see value. Had I left, how are we going to fill a gap for a product designer / product manager / all of this that I filled. Yeah.
That's a great answer.
Yeah.
I think this then kind of segues to another question that I was keeping an eye on, actually. So when it comes to, I guess, first of all, recognizing those kind of skills or those gaps that you're bridging that you were just talking about.
Yeah.
I think often in some situations, that once you kind of, I guess, present what benefits you can provide to the team and stuff like that, it sometimes leads to the conversation of title changes as
Yes.
well, and then obviously
Yes.
the pay rise and all of that. So one of the questions that an audience member asked is, do you have any tips on how to kind of handle that kind of conversation with title change and its pay rise, especially in early stage startups where funding is usually tight?
Hi, Alyssa. Good question. I can definitely relate to this question because I've worked for a couple of startups, and bigger companies, they'll most likely give excuses on they don't have funding, whereas a startup, most of the time they don't have funding. Like, it's the truth. It's a fact. This is where I would go beyond the salary negotiation. So again, I would present facts, do all the usual things, have a good relationship, make sure you know who the key decision makers are so that you are speaking to the right people. Make sure, you're a high performer. So at least, when you ask for an increase, it's validated. But if they can't give you an increase because the funding just isn't there, I would negotiate other things. So, for example, in a previous role, I think during COVID, I think a lot of the staff had to do a 10K pay cut. But we were just, happy to be employed because, it was better than being completely redundant. In that way, actually, hopefully we never return back to COVID. You could negotiate days where, you might need to take a second job. So, for example, I was, again, very upfront with a previous boss. And I said, look, I understand the startup doesn't have funding. We're waiting for, that big client to land the deal. I totally understand that. And, there just isn't any money to give anyone a pay rise, including myself. So I said, to cover the cost of living, I've got a mortgage. I may need to, is there a way I can work, have one day a month where I work on my freelance work or, fortnightly, because I need the second job to help fund my cost of living. I don't want to leave. I don't want to, I'm not in the position to leave just to get extra pay because there is, the current market's tight. So I was trying to negotiate, through honesty to go, I'm not getting paid enough. I need to find a way to help myself by possibly doing, getting a second job. How can you help me stay? And it turned out they were so appreciative of my transparency. That is when they agreed to give me a 4-day work week on the same pay of a 5-day full-time salary. So I was working 4 days on a full-time salary, and it wasn't prorated because they gave me that 5th day week to work on my freelance stuff, knowing that, I was underpaid. So at least that gap could be slightly filled with that one extra day just to help me out.
Would you then say, if you're in a situation where you're not able to negotiate any additional kind of, I guess, benefits, I suppose, or kind of to bridge that gap, then you should probably reconsider the situation overall?
Yeah. Then I would have that situation, to the previous question about, whenever I negotiate, it's always in stages. So I'll always, present the full view of what I want. So just say I wanted a 4-day week, because, okay, well, maybe I can do a half day on Fridays, or maybe instead of working 9 to 5, can I work, 9 to 4, so I can start my freelance work earlier? Like, do you know what I mean? So that I'm still doing my primary role. I am trying to create some flexibility for myself, but even if I work a 7-hour day instead of an 8-hour day, just to help myself, if it is a freelance role or whatever, there needs to be a little bit of wiggle room. But if the startup goes, no, but we need you, you're working, you're wearing 2 to 3 hats, we can't afford this, then I would be transparent to say, look, I want to invest my time here. I realize it's a small startup. If you still get, 100% no's, it's up to you whether, and I know it is very difficult, whether you want to just, work an extra job on weekends, which is, what I've had to do sometimes, or even after hours, but just present them with the reality that this is not sustainable. You will, probably eventually reach burnout, and, you can't just accept a no all the time. There has to be something that you get out of it.
I love the way that you frame that, actually. And that's like a lot of knowing your own self-worth,
Yeah.
And that
So
self-awareness.
I was actually in that situation during
transparency.
COVID. Where I had a second job and I was just working 9 to 5, and then I was working like 10 to midnight.
Yeah. Well, hopefully, as you said, we don't kind of return to, the lockdowns
exactly.
and COVID situation. Keeping an eye on the time, I would love to just step back and, answer this, ask this one last question that is maybe a bit more personal, but I feel like a lot of people would love to know more about is what for you was the turning point in recognizing your own self-worth and having the confidence to express that?
Hi, Beth. Congrats on the new role, by the way. I've had a few turning points. I think, including doing virtual talks like this. If anyone happens to watch my transformation journey, for me, I used to be super shy. It's just really putting myself out there, taking a risk in talking about money up front. So, my culture, Filipino is typically submissive, passive. But when I kind of, started to speak up a little, it was a little bit scary. But then when I got a positive result, I was like, oh, okay, maybe I'll speak up some more. So it does take, being brave and taking a risk. And then, as you get more and more positive results, you test, you fail. As you can see, I presented, my failures as well, what not to do. So all of this came into fruition for me realizing my worth. The more companies recognized my skill and kept giving me a pay rise. So it was kind of that, even though it was that, material validation, it was also that company culture validation as well. Whether there was a specific turning point, my worth. I'd probably say in that role where you don't have to wait to get a $30,000 pay rise to understand your worth. It was completely surprising. But it made me realize, a lot of entry-level UX designers, I generally feel for them because it's so competitive. But really looking back to your transferable skills, mentioning that in your interview, and really presenting yourself not as someone who has no experience, but someone who can provide other experience on top of what's being asked for, but then really backing yourself as well. The more you ask, the more you gain, but it needs to be validated and you need to back yourself.
I think that's a very great high to end the session on. So, putting yourself out there, taking the risk
Yeah.
and speaking up, about
Yes.
both yourself, well, promoting
Yeah.
yourself, but also about
Yes.
money as a topic as a
Exactly.
whole as well. I love
Yeah.
that. So,
Thank
keeping an eye on time, unfortunately, that is all we have time for today. But if you do have any more questions, feel free to reach out to Ermi through her socials. Again,
Mhm.
as I was saying in the chat, these slides will be shared later on as well.
Mhm.
So feel free to, yeah, just look through these socials or note it down now, take a photo if you can. And that's it for today's session. Thank you so much for your time, Ermi.
Thank you so
Thank
much.
you,
It's been so
everyone
much
else that
fun.
tuned in today. Yes, I had
Yeah.
so much fun and learned so many great tips and like that boost of
Awesome.
confidence as well.
Yeah.
And yeah, I'll see everyone else around at the other sessions today. Thank you so much.
Bye,
Bye.
everyone. Bye.